What would you do if a nuclear explosion happened right now? This isn't a question to be taken lightly. The immediate aftermath of a nuclear explosion is a crucial time for survival. It's not about panic, it's about rapid, decisive action. Your immediate reaction could very well be the difference between life and death. The first thing to understand is the importance of finding shelter. And I'm not talking about ducking under a table or hiding behind a sofa. No, we're talking about a solid, robust shelter that can protect you from the radioactive fallout that follows a nuclear explosion. Here's the thing about radioactive fallout. It's deadly, and it's invisible. It descends from the sky after a nuclear explosion, carried by the wind, and can settle on anything and everything. It's not something you can just brush off your jacket or wipe off your face. It's a lethal rain that you don't want to be caught in. The goal, then, is to put as much distance and as many barriers as possible between you and the radioactive fallout. The more walls, the more concrete, brick, and soil you can put between you and the outside world, the better. So where do you go? Basements and underground structures are ideal. If those aren't available, go to the center of a tall building. It might not be perfect, but it's better than being out in the open. But remember, time is of the essence. You ideally want to find this shelter in the first few minutes following a blast. The quicker you act, the less exposure you'll have to the radioactive fallout. Now I know what you're thinking. This is a pretty grim topic, but the reality is, knowledge is power. And in this case, knowledge could be the key to survival. So let this sink in. Take it to heart. If the unthinkable happens, your immediate reaction can save your life. Remember, the first few minutes are crucial. The quicker you find shelter, the better chance you have of surviving. Now that you've found shelter, what's next? You might be wondering. Well, the answer lies in understanding the necessities of a good shelter. It's not just about having a roof over your head, it's about what's inside that roof that truly matters. Firstly, let's talk about food. It's essential to have a stockpile of non-perishable food items. Think canned goods, dried fruits, nuts, and protein bars. Remember, you're preparing for an unknown length of stay, so it's better to have more than you think you'll need. Next up is water. It might seem obvious, but it's surprising how many people overlook this. You'll need a substantial amount of clean, drinkable water. A person can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water, so make sure you have plenty of it and don't forget to store it properly to avoid contamination. Now, on to medical supplies. In the aftermath of a nuclear explosion, you'll need to be prepared for potential injuries and illnesses. A well-stocked first aid kit is a must-have. This should include bandages, antiseptic wipes, pain relief medication, and any prescription medications that you or your loved ones might need. But a shelter is not just about physical needs. Communication with the outside world is crucial. This is where a battery-powered or hand-crank radio comes into play. It's your lifeline to emergency broadcasts and updates. Information is power, and in a situation like this, it could mean the difference between making a life-saving decision or a fatal mistake. And let's not forget about sanitation. Hygiene is important to prevent the spread of diseases. Make sure you have some basic sanitation supplies like soap, hand sanitizer, and toilet paper. All these elements come together to create a safe and sustainable environment that can support life in the most dire of circumstances. A well-stocked shelter can be the difference between life and death. So take the time to prepare. Your future self might just thank you for it. What is fallout and why is it dangerous, you may ask? Well, let's dive right into it. Fallout is the residual radioactive material propelled into the upper atmosphere following a nuclear blast. It's not just the immediate explosion that's a concern. This fallout descends back to Earth, coating everything it touches with radioactive particles. Think of it as a deadly, invisible layer of dust settling over everything in its path. Now, you might be wondering, why is this fallout dangerous? The answer lies in its very nature. It's radioactive. It emits high-energy particles that can damage living tissue and DNA on a cellular level, leading to a condition known as radiation sickness. The symptoms of this illness might not be immediate, but over time they can be debilitating, even fatal. Nausea, vomiting, weakness, and a loss of hair are just a few signs of radiation sickness. But here's the thing, just because fallout is dangerous doesn't mean you're powerless against it. There are ways to minimize exposure and keep yourself safe. One of the most effective methods is to stay inside, preferably in a shelter that's been prepared in advance. This isn't the time to venture outside and assess the damage. To further safeguard yourself, seal off windows and doors. You want to keep the radioactive dust out of your living space as much as possible. Use duct tape, plastic sheeting, anything you can get your hands on to create a barrier between you and the fallout. Now let's say you do have to go outside, for whatever reason, it's crucial to avoid fallout dust. If you've been outside, remove your clothing before re-entering your shelter to prevent bringing in radioactive particles. In this world of nuclear uncertainties, fallout is a silent killer. It's insidious and invisible, but it's not invincible. With the right knowledge and precautions, you can minimize its impact. Remember, your survival isn't just about the immediate aftermath of a nuclear explosion, it's about enduring the long-term effects as well. Fallout is a silent killer, but with the right knowledge, you can minimize its impact. How long should you stay in your shelter after a nuclear explosion? This is one of the most critical questions you'll face in such a situation. The answer, while it may vary slightly depending on the specifics of the incident, is generally a minimum of 48 hours. Why 48 hours, you ask? Well, it's because fallout radiation levels are at their most lethal in the immediate aftermath of a nuclear explosion. The intensity of this radiation diminishes over time, and the first 2 days are crucial. During this period, the radiation outside your shelter is so intense that it can be lethal in just a few hours of exposure. So, staying put is not just a good idea, it's a necessity for survival. Now you might be thinking, 2 days doesn't sound like much. But, when you're cooped up in a shelter with limited resources, time can stretch out indefinitely. It's essential to ration your supplies carefully. Food, water, medical kits, everything must be used sparingly. Remember, you're not just surviving for the next 2 days, but potentially much longer. Maintaining a calm demeanor is equally important during this time. Panic and stress can lead to rash decisions, mistakes, and unnecessary consumption of resources. It's a good idea to have activities in place to keep your mind occupied and to maintain a sense of normalcy. Whether it's playing cards, reading, or simply chatting with your loved ones, these activities can help keep stress levels in check. Your shelter is your lifeline. It's your fortress against the invisible enemy that is fallout radiation. It is your home, your hospital, and your sanctuary. The more time you can spend within its safe confines, the better your chances of survival. In this period of uncertainty and danger, remember to stay patient and focused. It's not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about being the most prepared and the most patient. Because when it comes to surviving a nuclear fallout, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Patience and preparedness are key in these critical hours after the blast. When is it safe to leave the shelter? That's the question you'll be wrestling with after an extended stay hunkered down in the midst of a nuclear fallout. The best answer? It depends. A key factor is the decrease in fallout radiation levels. Radiation decays rapidly, but it's a process that can take several weeks. Ideally, you want to wait until the radiation levels have dropped significantly before considering venturing outside. But how do you know when that is? Well, during a nuclear fallout, emergency broadcasts become your best friend. These broadcasts, delivered through various channels, will provide vital information about the current radiation levels and the safest areas to be in. They will guide you on when it's safe to leave your shelter and where you can go. However, it's not just about stepping out when the coast is clear. There's a need for caution when re-emerging. The world outside your shelter will be vastly different from the one you left. Areas could still be contaminated, and remnants of radioactive material can pose a threat. So how do you navigate this new world? Embrace the mantra of safety first. Avoid areas that were close to the blast site, as they are likely to have higher levels of radiation. Stick to areas that were shielded from the fallout. These are places that are indoors, underground, or behind thick walls. And remember, patience is paramount. The longer you can wait before re-emerging, the safer it will be. When you do decide to venture out, always carry a Geiger counter, if you have one. This device measures radiation levels, helping you avoid contaminated areas. And always listen to emergency broadcasts for updates. Surviving a nuclear explosion is possible. With the right knowledge and preparation, you can increase your chances of surviving this catastrophic event. It's not about fear, it's about being prepared and understanding the world you're living in. Because in the end, knowledge is your greatest ally in the face of any disaster.